This is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Democratic Socialist congressperson from New York's 14th District. As you may know, AOC went to Boston University and graduated in 2011 with a BA in International Relations and Economics, which is surprising considering that she's shown that she knows very little about either.
We look at these figures and we say, oh, unemployment is low, everything is fine, right? Well, unemployment is low because everyone has 2 jobs.
That clip never gets old. Anyway, despite holding a bachelor's, AOC was not working in a field related to international relations or economics. Instead, she became a bartender/waitress and was able to take extended periods of time off so that she could take road trips to Standing Rock and the Women's March. Because that's what responsible adults do. And that's fine. It's not illegal to squander away your degrees and be fiscally irresponsible. But if you choose that path, it's no one's fault but your own. So back in June 2019, during an event unveiling the College for All Act, AOC revealed that she too had yet to fully pay off her student loans.
And I will be completely honest, I will disclose my personal stake in this fight because I have student loans too. And I think it's so funny. A year ago, I was waiting tables in a restaurant, and it was literally easier for me to become the youngest woman in American history elected to Congress than it is to pay off my student loan debt.
It was hard for her to pay off her student loan debt because she made it hard by seemingly prioritizing having fun over getting a real job and becoming a serious person. Of course, it's possible that she went in a couple interviews and those employers refused to hire a self-described democratic socialist with an economics degree.
Now people are in their 30s and older that have taken on insurmountable amounts of debt because we have sold them an empty bill of goods. And what we need to do is make it right.
So borrowers were allowed to take out student loans to pay for worthless degrees in drama, liberal arts, gender studies, etc. But in AOC world, there's no such thing as personal responsibility. It's the government's fault for giving those loans out in the first place.
And that is why we have to both make public colleges tuition free and forgive all student loan debt at the same time.
So under AOC's plan, let's take colleges that don't actually teach anything useful and make them free. And by free, I mean subsidized by the American taxpayer. Then let's forgive the $1.7 trillion in outstanding student debt because equity or something.
We are experiencing a systemic and economy-wide threat to grinding our economy to a halt because families and people in my generation, older and younger, are not buying cars, we're not purchasing homes, we are not building families because of the scepter that student loan debt represents on our generation.
The average student debt that Americans hold is $36,000. And her claim is that this debt is holding these borrowers back from, say, purchasing a home or buying a car. But things like homes and cars also cost money and will usually run you more than the average amount of student debt. So if you think that paying the bare minimum of $400 a month is a burden, just wait until you have to pay $1,500 a month in mortgage payments.
The United States has a policy of actively disincentivizing higher education.
What?
We disincentivize people from getting a college or secondary education beyond high school.
So the federal government lends out billions of dollars in student loans every year to disincentivize people from going to college. Got it.
There are hundreds of thousands of people in this country who owe more on their student loans now than they did when they first took them out.
And that's true. NBC News recently aired a report about one of those people, a mother who took out several loans for her daughter's education.
Patricia Rizzo took out 7 Parent Plus loans over 8 semesters to get her daughter Emily Rizzo through Skidmore College. For Rizzo, her interest rates on Plus loans vary from 6 to 7%.
The principal was $100,000, but I accrued $26,000 in interest, and this is my balance right now, $126,167.
And currently, her loans are in forbearance. But that's okay, because I'm sure that eventually she's going to pay it back in full, right?
Some parents are borrowing much more than they can afford. In Rizzo's case, she earns around $40,000 a year working at a drug rehab center in New Jersey. The 62-year-old plans to pay the loan off, but has not started making payments.
So her daughter graduated in 2018, and this woman hasn't even started making payments? Spoiler alert, she's never going to pay that loan back. And this is a prime example of why the government should not indiscriminately hand out federal loans. Because how is a 62-year-old making 40 grand a year before taxes, I might add, going to be able to pay back a $100,000 loan in 20 years? And at the rate she's going to owe more than 100 grand in interest alone.
And the least we can do, we have a moral obligation, an economic obligation, a political obligation to cancel student loan debt in the United States of America.
What about the moral obligation of someone paying back the loan that they agreed to pay back? Nah, not the same thing. So back in September 2019, during a Committee on Financial Services meeting, AOC bragged about doing something that millions of people do every month without fanfare.
I literally made a student loan payment while I was sitting here at this chair.
Wow, what a hero.
And I looked at my balance, and it is $20,237.16. And I just made a payment that took me down to $19,000. So I feel really accomplished right now.
Okay, so I'm going to assume that her payment was probably a few $100 and brought her from $20,237 and put her somewhere in the $19,000 range. But for simplicity's sake, let's take her literally and say that she brought her balance down to exactly $19,000. But then, more than 2 years later, in December 2021, AOC gave the American people an update on her student loan balance.
I'm 32 years old now. I have over $17,000 in student loan debt.
So that means that between September 2019 and December 2021, a 27-month period, her balance only decreased by less than $2,000. Does that mean that AOC's monthly payment is only $75 a month? Does she have a 60-year loan term? Does she have an insane interest rate? Nope, and it can only mean one thing. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez hasn't made a student loan payment in nearly 2 years. On March 13th, 2020, in the early days of the pandemic, the Department of Education suspended federal loan payments. And this loan payment pause was meant to give relief to people and families facing economic uncertainty. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, on the other hand, has been receiving a regular paycheck during the entirety of the pandemic. Now, I'm not saying that she's doing anything criminal, but what she is doing is incredibly stupid. Because during this loan payment pause, the Department of Education dropped the interest rate down to 0%. So that means you can make payments towards your balance without having to worry about your loan accruing interest. So if AOC paid even $200 a month over the last 24 months of the pause, her balance would be around $12,000. But instead, it's over $17,000. So by putting off paying her loans now, AOC is going to end up having to pay thousands of dollars in interest down the road. And if she can't be responsible with her own personal finances, then why should the American taxpayer have any faith that she's going to be responsible with theirs? And the thing is, she can easily afford making payments because as a member of Congress, she makes $174,000 a year. I mean, she can afford to buy a long-range model Tesla, and she can afford to live in a luxury apartment complex, complete with a Peloton studio and infinity pool, and she can afford to spend thousands of dollars to buy a purebred dog from a breeder. So I'm pretty sure that during the last 3 years she's been in Congress, she could have easily paid off her student loan, but instead, she'd rather have you, the American taxpayer, pay for it.
And the least we can do,
We have a moral obligation, an economic obligation, a political obligation to cancel student loan debt in the United States of America.
And here's the thing. The longer that she waits to pay it off, the longer that she gets to complain about her student debt and tweet out statements like, "Student loans are a scam." But the fact is, she's not paying off her loan because she believes that Joe Biden can be convinced to cancel student debt, even though experts point out that only Congress has that authority.
Because there are people who suggest he doesn't have the authority. Is that a legitimate argument or just maybe a smokescreen?
I don't think it's a legitimate argument. We've seen him use the same legal authority that the president has used to suspend student loan payments is the same authority that he would use to cancel them.
But Biden has only canceled debt for specific groups, like borrowers who have a total or permanent disability, borrowers who were scammed by ITT Technical Institute, or borrowers eligible for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. In other words, there was reasoning behind discharging those loans. Biden can't just tweet that student loans are a scam and use that as an excuse to cancel out $1.7 trillion in debt. But AOC claims that it's not only in Joe Biden's best interest, but also the Democrats as a whole. In a February 2022 interview with The New Yorker, Ocasio-Cortez states, "I can't underscore how much the hesitancy of the Biden administration to pursue student loan cancellation has demoralized a very critical voting bloc that the president, the House, and the Senate need in order to have any chance at preserving any of our majority." AOC is saying that if Democrats want to stay in power, they have to bribe a large voting bloc with student loan cancellation. However, according to the Department of Education, of the nearly 46 million who have student debt, 54% owe less than $20,000 in federal student loans, and 1/3 of all federal student loan borrowers owe less than $10,000. In other words, the majority of student debt holders are not in a crisis, and therefore they do not need to be bailed out. But AOC thinks that 7 out of 10 Americans who don't have student loans are totally going to be okay with paying higher taxes to bail out a bunch of college graduates.
What a ridiculous assertion.
And on that note, that's it for now. Be sure that you're still subscribed to the channel, check out these videos that you may have missed, and as always, I hope to see you next time. If there is next time.